Hey, this is Pradeep with Sensatura, and today we are looking at some fragrances for fall 2025. This year, I have some staples which are usually in my rotation, but I thought I would take the chance to showcase some creations that are not discussed very often. Everyone can easily pick a Serge Lutens for this time of the year, so hopefully this video will introduce some new ones to explore. So let's get on with the list in no particular order. By the way, I also made another video listing 5 fragrances which I have been wearing in the last weeks of summer, transitioning to fall. It was released a couple of weeks ago. It's now up on the channel, so I will avoid repeating those here. Starting off from 2006, this is 5 o'clock au Gingembre from Serge Lutens, composed of course by Christopher Frederic. This is one of the first fragrances I reached for as things started to cool down. It's essentially a warm, spicy, woody scent. Lots of cinnamon, candied ginger, dry woods, and a splash of smoked black tea. There's a sharpness running through, which could be from the ginger, the resins, or the hay accord. Probably the combination of all those. There's some honeyed sweetness, keeping the characteristic Lutens juxtaposition of sweet and dry throughout the wearing experience. Additionally, there's a lot of tonka, which at times feels like tobacco, suede, of course it's also woody, complementing the hints of amber. It's nothing too strange, not overly strong or tenacious. It's just the right kind of warm smell that I like to reach for this time of the year. Up next is Cuir Ottoman from Parfum d'Empire, another favorite brand of mine, from 2006, composed by Marc-Antoine Cocteau. This takes the classic iris leather combination, which has been around since the time of Nice 10, and adds its own twist. It's not the typical IBQ dry cement smelling leather. It feels more velvety, balsamic, relatively softer. The iris is also amped up in a way that, along with the leather, it feels like two pillars of the combination. Usually this classic leather accord is paired with orange blossom, but here you get this soft, waxy jasmine instead. So this floral leather iris paired with the balsamic resinous touches is what makes for the actual wearing experience. There is some creamy vanilla and temple incense in there, rendering it almost rubbery, chewy at times. And yet it is not ornamental with all these elements. It feels saturated and grey all the same, circling back to its classic roots. An excellent take on leather. Next is Cost by Cost from 2004, composed by Olivia Jacobetti. This is the scent of the popular Cost Hotel in Paris, and it's not one of those cases where the venue served as an inspiration. No, this is actually made for the hotel itself, along with other scented products, of course with the same signature. It is known to be a popular venue within the fashionista circle. They have their own music mix which made them popular in the early 2000s. That's kind of what I feel when I smell this. It has this 90s, 2000s kind of styling to it. Reminds me of other fragrances from that time as well. In terms of scent, it is this spicy, woody, aromatic, kind of brooding, intimate smell. There's lots of warm Christmas spices, cinnamon, nutmeg, clove, with this particular bay leaf note, all done in this smooth, low-pitched fashion. It reminds me of the perfumer's work at Lubin, where the notes seem so heavy, but the wearing experience is very smooth and soft. The dry down is mostly about the woods. There is some rose and geranium, with this dusty, properly woody sandalwood, not the creamy, musky style which is common these days. It creates this old furniture, thick red curtains, rosewood with a hint of tobacco-like smell. There's even a hint of Chanel Egoist in there, so it can be a bit old-fashioned, sauna, spa-like smell for some people. That's why a friend of mine prefers the room spray version, but I enjoy this EDT version quite a lot. Next is one of the many leather fragrances from Hermès. This is Violette Volynka from the Hermès collection. Released in 2002, composed by the Innos perfumer Christine Nagel, As usual, this fragrance is a study in two primary pillars, leather and violet. While that combination isn't necessarily new or revolutionary, the Hermès treatment transforms it into a compelling composition. The violet is not just a supporting note, it feels glossy, interacting with the leather in a way that feels reflective and deliberate. The leather comes across smoky, tannic, and dusky. It is inspired by this particular Russian leather called Volynka. I think they use it in a lot of their products like handbags. The effect is bold, elegant, dense, smoky, and slightly sweet. This is one of the more tenacious and assertive creations from this lineup, that is relatively speaking, because it has a lot of creations being poetic and transparent. This still earns its position in their leather lineup by being distinctive enough. Moving on, from 2024, composed by Dominique Ropion, this is Ambre Liquide from Astier de Villatte. I just bought this at the beginning of the year. I believe it was part of my haul video. What Ropion has been doing with this brand is partly research focused. They collaborate with historians to uncover formulas of perfumes from different time periods and try to do reinterpretations, compliant with current standards, of course. For instance, they have recreated formulas used by the Romans, the Greeks, and the Egyptians. It was released in a set called 3 Historical Perfumes a few years ago. I do have it and I was quite impressed. This one, Ambre Liquide, is said to be based on a recipe from the Middle Ages, which explains why it shares some similarities with the other 3 compositions in the collection. It is spicy and resinous. There's lots of dry cinnamon, clove, nutmeg, somewhat anisic and sharp as it starts. It feels like a dry gum resin and yet fluid as per the name. Almost feels like experiencing a dry tea. There is some old-fashioned myrrh along with some dry, dusty, classic amber. It's all washed over by this rose, which feels like rose water, almost giving the rosy hue to the amber, making it so soothing. One caveat to the other 3 creations is that they can come across like medicinal recipe preparations at times. There are signs of that here, but it's a bit more balanced and bearable as a conventional fragrance. Next is from a newish niche brand called Hima Jomo. They create mostly natural fragrances inspired by the Himalayan mountain region. From 2022, composed by Delphine Thierry, this is Autumn in Lokha. It's inspired by the barley harvest at the beginning of fall in this small town near Tibet. Obviously, that's just the brand's narration. The reason I enjoy this fragrance is because it recalls a memorable trip of mine. This opens spicy and smoky. There's some dry pepperiness coming in, supported by the bay leaf. Till this point, it's a very nicely done, convincing, smoky fragrance. What takes it to the next level is this unexpected bread or bran accord joining the smokiness. It's something I haven't seen being paired with smoke that often. And it's this part that reminds me of some trekking trips that I've taken near this region. When I took this trip, the routes are fairly isolated and distant from the town. So your only option for food are these temples and pilgrimage sites along the way. Sometimes this food was even free because a lot of people making these trips are not well off. And even if you're ready to pay, you get the same food. So it sort of creates this sense of community. What they prepare is usually whole wheat bread cooked on ashy wood fire, sometimes with spices, potatoes, and stuff like that. That's kind of what it reminds me of. Not that it is foodie, but there is certainly that reminder, maybe even with the temple incense in the background. There is some dry, soft sandalwood coming through in the dry down. Together it kind of creates this meditative smell, something Central Asian about the way it comes across. It may not be for everyone, but I enjoy this a lot. I think the brand has 4 fragrances representing each season, but this is easily my favorite. Next is probably going to end up being the best signature designer release of the year. Obviously, I would be glad to give that credit, to something totally novel and innovative, but I'm hard pressed to find anything else in the signature range which is as good. Even Cartier hasn't done something like this in years. So we have to go back to a flanker of a fragrance from the 90s. From 2025, this is Déclaration Eau de Parfum, composed by Malle. This takes the signature of the original EDT and highlights a few particular elements. The Parfum version, which came before this, magnified the amber, labdanum, leathery side of things. Here it is more about the spices, specifically cardamom and this zingy ginger along with cinnamon. Not too much of the cumin returning here. Instead of the dry, aromatic fashion in which the spiciness was done in the original EDT, here it's treated like a chai accord, of course with a generous amount of tea thrown in for good measure. It's not a gourmand fragrance by any means, but it has this creamy, smooth sandalwood as it dries down. It's sweet, spicy, warm, inviting and autumnal. Smells like the color of the bottle essentially. Still has Cartier's classic touch. I already wore quite a bit of this as I bought it. Now I think it's time for even more. After that is Samharam from Arte Profumi. It was released in 2017. Sadly, the perfumer is not known. The name itself is a reference to a port city in Oman, which played a key role in incense trade, which should make it obvious it's an incense fragrance. Another new purchase of mine from a few months ago that has quickly become one of my favorite incense fragrances. There's something unfiltered about the way it's done here. Of course, the Italians know their way around incense fragrances. It's a very balsamic, ambery, musky, dry incense. Lots of myrrh and benzoin complementing the incense. It seems to have hints of the now discontinued Tom Ford's Sahara Noir. Feels ancient, mythical, almost like some fiery lava encountered by a desert nomad somewhere. It also does not shy away from the animalic aspects that incense can have. Just a touch of sweetness, some aldehydes and dry spices giving a lot of lift. It's simply sensational. Up next is the only Celine fragrance I own. This is Nightclubbing from 2019. Perfumer, once again, not known. But it's made very clear to us that it is creatively directed by Aedes. Of course, he has since left the brand. We are yet to see a new release under the new creative director, Mr. Ryder. I wonder whether he will even be involved to the same extent. Either way, it's not like I was completely blown away by the existing fragrances. What I do appreciate though is the fact that they all sort of adamantly stick to this particular powdery, soft, vanillic, iris-laced aesthetic, no matter what. One creation where it comes together the best for me is in Nightclubbing. It has the plush vanilla, powdery iris and this stylized moss. Of course, no surprise. What really shapes up the structure is this subtle resinous green galbanum and this warm ashtray nicotine accord. It is not the conventional honeyed cherry tobacco by any means. It's this specific, soft, slightly burnt, acrid smell, kind of reminiscent of maybe a young person in some makeup who's just about to light up a filter cigarette, or maybe hugging someone who's been smoking and it gets on your clothes. The smell itself is a skin scent, which also helps that image. Not a surprise whatsoever if you have seen the models used by Celine. In fact, this entire collection seems to be made for those models. Not a bad fantasy to enter now and then. Ending with another usual suspect of mine, from 2000, composed by Michel Rudnitska. This is Noir Repis from Frederic. This is kind of like a combination of a spicy oriental and a fruity sheep. There's an overdose of spices in there. Cinnamon, nutmeg, clove, pepper and whatnot. Surprisingly not overwhelmingly spicy, especially in comparison to some modern fragrances. There's still a lot of freshness and a good balance of other notes, specifically because of the geranium, rose and this generous orange note. The sweetness helps too. The rose is aromatic, almost feels like rose water. Together, there is this creamy, fruity, peach, melon, orange kind of feeling to the scent. Still mostly abstract though. Comes across retro modern, seems to have references to Diorella and Rocha's Femme. Of course, made by the father of the perfumer, Edmund Rudnitska. There's a good amount of sandalwood, patchouli, amber, adding this sensuous warmth. Such a delightful wearing experience. It was the top 3 in my ranking of all the fragrances from the brand, and it completely deserves it. With all that being said, that has been my rundown of fragrances for fall 2025. And as always, thanks for watching, take care, and ciao.